Origins of the Cannibal Dragon of House of the Dragons. Dragons are intelligent. More intelligent than men, according to some masters. They have affection for their friends, and fury for their enemies. Tyrion Lannister. These massive creatures belong to the family of flying reptiles, some of which are also capable of breathing fire. They are rumored to have a strong connection to magic, which seems to be proven true when the magic begins to return to the world after the birth of the first 3 in over 200 years. Hey folks, welcome back to Pulsa Start, and you are watching Origins of the Cannibal Dragon of House of the Dragons. Dragons possess overwhelming and devastating power, capable of laying waste to armies and burning entire cities to ash. And that is why only incredible men were able to tame and ride dragons as beasts of war, and use them in battle, and to forge vast empires across the continents of Essos and Westeros. The greatest of these empires was the Valyrian Freehold, forged by the Valyrian Dragon Lords. The Cannibal Dragon was the oldest and most dangerous wild Targaryen dragon. Though there were countless other dragons, the sight of whom would shake people to their core, there was this one dragon who all, even the Targaryens, regarded as the sign of death. Though he doesn't have a name, men fishing the Waters of Dragonstone have taken to call him the Cannibal. And today we have decided to explore his origins. But before we dig in, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. Though it will only take a split second, it means a lot to us. Thank you. With that being said, let's get started. Content. Before beginning into his origin, the time he was born, where he was born, and how old he was when the Dance of Dragon began, let's see exactly what he looked like. Appearance. According to how men of his century described him, the cannibal was black as coal and had menacing green eyes. It was the biggest of the wild dragons dwelling on Dragonstone, and was said to be quite old as well. Nevertheless, the cannibal was only behind Balerion, Vhagar, and Meraxes in size. So now that we know how he looked and how big it was, it is time to move on to his name and birth. From what we know, dragons were named using one of two ways. The first way plays homage to the Targaryen Balerion heritage, and dictates naming dragons after the gods of old Valyria. But men following the second school of thought for naming their dragons believed in naming them on their appearance, or something that holds dear to themselves. For instance, King Aenys Targaryen and Queen Alysanne Targaryen's dragons were named after their coloring, Quicksilver and Silverwing respectively. When it comes to the cannibal, he gets his name on the basis of what he does. He cannibalizes his fellow dragons living in the Dragon Mountain. But more than its name, it is his birth that is the most intriguing thing to talk about him. And why is that so? The cannibal is speculated to have been the eldest and largest of all the other 3 dragons you will see in the House of the Dragons, and some amongst the small folk of Dragonstone say that the cannibal lived on the island even before the Targaryen arrived in 114 BC. But for this to be true, the cannibal would need to have been hatched at the very latest around the same time that Balerion arrived on Dragonstone in 114 BC. Balerion died of old age in 94 AC, at the age of at least 208 years, meaning that by 129 AC, the cannibal would need to be at least 35 years older than that. But we know that cannot be true because Balerion is the only dragon that died of old age. But why was he so antagonistic to the other Targaryen dragons? Many suggest that though this couldn't be possible that he was born before the arrival of the Targaryen, his antagonism may be because he was born of another egg that did not belong to them, and thus, he was from a different lineage of dragons altogether. Apart from that, if this was true, and he belonged to an egg that was laid by a dragon other than the ones the Targaryen family brought with them to Dragonstone, his age and disposition would both make sense. But this is next to impossible, because what are the odds of an egg not turning to stone while it was not attained in time? 0. So it is therefore believed that he was born from one of the clutches of eggs that hatched during the Century of Blood. Still curious to know his age and birthplace? Well, we have you covered because there is still one more theory that is by far the most accepted. This theory suggests that Cannibal would have been born around the time when Targaryen lords of Dragonstone lords became the lords of the 7 kingdoms. Targaryen ruled over Dragonstone for 114 years. Many dragons were born and died, and when they became the lords of the 7 kingdoms, they had 5 dragons, including Balerion. But by the time Aegon launched his conquest, 4 of them had died, and 2 new dragons had taken their place. And what is known about their dragons suggests that these dragons hatched around the halfway point of the Century of Blood. So there are great chances Cannibal was born along with them, and that would put his age around the same as Vhagar's, who is 180 years old at the time the dance ends. This makes Cannibal possibly the second oldest and second largest dragon in existence at the outbreak of the Civil War. And joining all the dots, we can safely say that Dragonmount on Dragonstone was the birthplace of this outrageous creature that today we call the Cannibal. So now that we at least know when he was born and where he was born, it is safe to move forward. But the dilemma is we know little about the early life of this monstrosity. But there is surely one thing that we know. His habits that can surely dot for us a map of how he spent his life, and that could also suggest a reason as to why they don't exist today. The life of Cannibal. Cannibalism is by far the most prominent trait giving the dragon its name. But what does it mean by that? Cannibalism means to eat members of the same species. While it is considered a hideous crime in the human population, nature doesn't see it that way, and is in fact one of the most commonly practiced habits among animals. But Cannibal would prefer feeding on smaller, younger dragons, and even dragon eggs sized much more like the worm species, like the eelworm. And we know that the Targaryen dragons are constantly described as worm-like, or serpentine in the books. In fact, Artemisia Gildan even says that watching 2 dragons fight each other was like watching 2 worms fight with teeth. And his love for hatchlings further translated into why there were only a few dragons in possession of the Targaryen, because this mighty beast would feast on them before they had a chance to open their eyes and grow into adults. Though by no means are we suggesting that the Cannibal is the only reason there were a smaller number of dragons at the time the Civil War broke out. If you assess logically, it was only after shifting the dragons to their Great Stone Stable from Dragonmont that they lived long enough to have a song written about them. So had they been allowed to continue to lair in Dragonmont, they would have similarly died as young dragons or hatchlings. And so, here Cannibal plays a crucial role because he is a major contributing factor to the fact it is often said that the Targaryens are more gods than men, that the blood of the dragon runs thicker than nothing else, and that a Targaryen is the closest thing to a living dragon you would have seen following the dance. So, it is not inaccurate to attribute the blame for not having dragons that day to these wild dragons that proudly feasted on their own species. But why did they do it? There could be one of the 3 reasons to eat only their own kind. There wasn't enough food to feed or bring down the booming population, or just because they particularly acquired a taste, and the latter seems to be the most accurate of all, and that led to his hideous reputation among his own kind. His lair was littered with the bones of dragon riders. Cannibal was a wild dragon, which means he was never ridden by any rider. In fact, before the Dance of the Dragons, the men, later called the Dragon Tamers, had made attempts to ride him dozens of times, and his lair was littered with their bones. When Prince Jacaerys Velaryon called for the dragon riders in 129 AC, not even one of the dragon seeds who attempted to tame the wild dragons dared to bother to disturb the Cannibal due to his reputation, and those who were foolish enough to do so did not return to tell the tale. Nevertheless, when Silver Denise tried to ride Sheepstealer, the dragon tore off his arm, and his son struggled to staunch his wound. The Cannibal descended upon them, drove off Sheepstealer, and devoured Silver Denise and his sons. Later, when in 130 AC, the carcass of the Grey Ghost was discovered at the Dragonmont's base, burnt and broken, torn apart and partially devoured, Dragonstone's Castellan Sir Robert Quince immediately named the Cannibal as the killer, though we later get to know that it was actually Sunfire. But it troubled fisherfolk that began to worry that the dragon would attack them as well, and urged Sir Roberts to send knights to kill the cannibal. He outrightly refused, saying that it was better that they left the dragon alone and forbade fishing in the waters to the east of Dragonmont, where the Grey Ghost's body had been found. However, Lady Bella Targaryen was not satisfied with this explanation, and proposed to discover the truth herself, as she had no fear of the cannibal, and her dragon Moondancer could outfly him. But Sir Robert knew how much things could go wrong, especially as the cannibal was involved. He barred her from taking the risk, and confined Bella to her chambers. The cannibal was one of the 4 dragons that survived the Dance of the Dragons, but disappeared after the war. Bottom line, this brings us to the end of the video. I hope you liked the video. Please give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon on your way out. This will only take a split second, but surely pump the YouTube algorithm to bring our videos to the top. See you in the next video.